Unfortunately, gamers have lost the fight for video games, and I don't know what's worse. The disgusting corporations lying and manipulating at every turn to maintain control, or the people defending them. Today, we're going to discuss both those lies and those excuses, because despite the fact that 1.3 million players signed a petition to make the gaming industry better, both the European Parliament and game publishers decided to show us gamers the middle finger. More than ever, the phrase comes to mind: if buying a game is not owning a game, then pirating a game is not stealing it. Because when laws fail, consumers sometimes have to take matters into their own hands. Let's get into it. Pretty much every gamer has heard of the Stop Killing Games initiative. In short, its goal was to introduce laws that would allow players to keep games playable after servers shut down or support ends for games they paid for. Under the current model used by many games, developers can shut down servers at any moment, even just days after launch, or revoke your access to games you've purchased for virtually any reason, and there's nothing you can do about it. It all started with Ubisoft's The Crew, which was shut down in 2024 for all players, despite having an architecture that could easily have allowed the game world to remain playable without online features. This initiative was meant to prevent exactly that kind of dirty moves. In May, a debate regarding Stop Killing Games took place, and all that remained was waiting for the European Parliament's verdict. Unfortunately, it ended in failure because, as quoted by Out-of-Games, the Commission cannot propose a legal obligation to keep video games playable after they stop being provided commercially. In other words, we will do nothing, and what are you going to do about it? Let me just remind you that older games such as Battlefield 3 are still largely kept alive through private servers, and no one is complaining about it. But you know, then those publisher vultures wouldn't have total control over players, and that's something they absolutely refuse to allow. What's even worse is that in another quote proving a complete lack of understanding, we can read: current European consumer protection rules already provide important safeguards. European rules require providers to inform customers of the duration of the contract and the conditions for its termination, and allow consumers to obtain a refund when the discontinuation of a video game is not in line with the contract or reasonable expectations. I don't know what kind of empty mind considers selling an indefinite license that can be revoked at any moment to be protecting customer interests. Gamers are one of the most exploited groups of customers on the planet. What's especially frustrating is that the failure of Stop Killing Games wasn't the result of good intentions. It was the result of lies, manipulation, and the enormous amounts of money behind this industry. Just look at the main organization opposing the initiative: Video Games Europe. Calling it Europe is itself the middle finger I mentioned earlier. Out of all the gaming companies involved, only 4 are actually European companies, and I crossed one of them out because it's the main reason this entire initiative exists, and therefore deserves no voice in this matter. The companies marked in the red are American, while those marked in blue are Asian. Both Video Games Europe and their American doppelganger lied at every opportunity, deliberately misrepresenting how games actually work. Private servers are not always a viable alternative option for the players, as the protections we put in place to secure players' data, remove illegal content, and combat unsafe community content would not exist and would leave rights holders liable. This statement is misleading. The Stop Killing Games initiative does not require every publisher to provide private servers. It only demands that a game remain playable after support ends. Furthermore, there are countless examples of games that have operated on private servers for years without creating legal problems for the original publishers. These proposals would curtail developer choice by making these video games prohibitively expensive to create. No evidence or analysis has been presented to support this claim, so apparently you pulled it out of your ass. It's a prediction, not a fact. Besides, gaming companies absolutely love blaming their toxic practices on the rising costs of development. The problem is simple: nobody asked you to spend that money. Maybe stop hiring Hollywood actors publishers to perform motion capture on a cube. The end result would be exactly the same, only cheaper. The industry ensures that players are given fair notice of the prospective changes in compliance with local consumer protection laws. Oh sure, then if we will accept that, then what stops Sony from basically doing the same thing with PlayStation consoles? They can just send you a message a week in advance saying, hey buddy, starting next week your PlayStation 5 won't work anymore, go buy a PlayStation 6. Brilliant plan. I'm sure some executives are already drooling just thinking about it. But how could we expect a different response from the EU Parliament when, according to Stop Killing Games, before the final verdict, the European Commission was invited by this shady organization Video Games Europe to a private meeting. Participation required an invitation which, unsurprisingly, nobody from Stop Killing Games received. Ubisoft CEO, however, did receive one. It sounds like some villainous shit straight out of a movie. Except this time the villains are real, because it's entirely possible that this one meeting mattered more to Commission than the voices of over 1 million players. What also drives me crazy is the attitude taken by the American opponents of Stop Killing Games. We don't expect innovators to continue supporting their very first car model, their original smartphone, or an outdated operating system software, but this bill suggests that online video games should last forever. Did a piano fall on your head? In what fucking world does an outdated phone suddenly stop functioning entirely? Does a man in a suit show up at your house and confiscate your old car because the company no longer supports that model? Every one of these analogies falls apart when applied to video games, because the customer still keeps a functional product even if it no longer receives updates. That's the problem with all these defenders of temporary game rentals. You're desperately trying to justify a harmful practice, but you don't actually know how. One guy on YouTube compared it to going to a hairdresser, except even hair dye tells you how long the color is expected to last and when it might start fading. If you shave my head bald, I don't wake up the next morning with afro just because you decided to close your salon. It's not GTA San Andreas. Other people compare games to movie tickets or software licenses. The only problem is that in every one of these cases you're clearly told how long the service lasts. But of course, games don't work that way. Instead, you get a license that lasts exactly as long as the publisher feels like allowing it. And the truth is that in cases like Concord and the day before, players only received refunds because publishers were concerned about public relations, not because any license agreement protected them. And how many people have permanently lost access to games they purchased simply because their account got banned? Games that weren't removed, cancelled or shut down, the system just decided that your time was up. And that's why comparing the sale of video games to any other licensed service or discontinued product is simply foolish. More and more, the companies are becoming increasingly aggressive in their attempts to take away everything you own. As one famous quote said, you will own nothing and be happy. Monthly subscriptions for heated seats, printers that only work after paying a recurring fee, streaming services for movies and games, constantly raising prices while limiting access through cheaper ad-supported plans or smaller libraries. And on top of that, games that are supposedly yours but can stop being yours at any second, for any reason. We live in a time where the only reliable way to truly own a piece of media is to pirate it or buy it on GOG. That's where the phrase, if buying a game is not owning it, then pirating a game is not stealing it, comes from. Publishers want the benefit of both worlds. They charge a full price as if they are selling you a product, while treating it as nothing more than granting temporary permission to use it. But if we are all using a video game that we don't actually own, then people using a cracked version aren't stealing it from anyone. Because from whom exactly? From the cracker who bought the game in order to crack it? He never owned it either, so ethically speaking, it couldn't have been stolen from him. Publishers behave dishonestly towards players, but players are expected to behave honorably towards publishers? That's funny. In my opinion, any digital good for which you pay full price but receive no ownership rights may be acquired through any means the current state of internet allows you to use. It's basically the same principle that Louis Rossmann argues that you should have a right to repair any product you've purchased. Taking away ownership rights to something you've paid full price for is disgusting, and I'm very glad that gamers have ways of fighting back against these toxic practices. Because solving this problem would be incredibly simple. Either publishers allow players to purchase a video game with actual ownership rights, or they create a real license. You know, a license with a clear beginning and a clear end. For example, a new Call of Duty would explicitly state that you are paying 80 euros to play it for 2 years, not more, not less. Or Concord could have launched with a 2-week license. At least then players would know exactly what they are buying. But you see, that's the issue. A license that's too short might discourage people from purchasing the game, and a license that's too long could create problems if the game sells poorly. That's exactly why publishers keep pushing deeper into the swamp of indefinite licenses. That's why they fight so hard to ensure players never gain rights to what they should rightfully own. But goodwill only goes so far. And the more toxic practices publishers adopt, the more creative solutions customers will come up with. We're already at the point where using free alternatives, or for example replacing an Adobe license with an endless copy, is considered by many to be justified because of Adobe's toxic subscription tactics and outrageous prices. The same applies to games. If someone wants to stay completely pure, they limit themselves to indie games, whose developers genuinely want you to own their games, want you to enjoy them and create them primarily with players in mind. For the more ambitious, let's say, game ownership activists, technologies such as hypervisors and new methods for bypassing de novo protection continues to emerge. Game publishers are becoming increasingly comfortable with toxic behavior. Electronic Arts openly admits that games should contain more advertising, and apparently 1.3 million player signatures still aren't enough to convince anyone to finally put games back into the hands of gamers. This is the last call to unite, like that screen in a video game warning you to finish all of your side quests before starting the final mission. If you have even the slightest doubt about a game, don't give them your money. They probably don't deserve it anyway. And every time a publisher pulls another stunt, think about this. Maybe eventually a phrase, if buying a game is not owning it, then pirating a game is not stealing it, will start making sense to you as well. Because they certainly aren't thinking about you when they create early access passes, add de novo that slows down performance, add microtransactions to a fully priced game, or require your game license to be revalidated every 5 minutes. Thank you very much for listening to my thoughts. I just want to say that I'm not encouraging anyone to download games from the internet, and I'm curious what you think about the failure of Stop Killing Games movement. Battle is over, but war is still going. And as always, the comments are yours and the likes are mine, so leave a thumbs up under this video. And I will see you in the next one. Until then, take care, bye bye.